It's not hate to say that we were kidnapped and brought here. It's true. It's not hate to say that we were Jim Crow, discriminated and segregated. It's true. It's not hate to say that the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in this country, came up with a hypocritical desegregation decision 9 years ago, which they haven't enforced yet. That's not hate. That's true.
You're quoted as having said when an airliner crashed with a number of white people on board that you were glad it happened.
The white race in this country collectively are guilty of these crimes that our people are suffering from collectively. And therefore they will suffer some collective disaster, collective grief. And when that plane crashed in France with 130 white people on
no one man should withstand the weight of the world on his shoulders that die when it's over. Ain't no global warming, the world get colder. Ain't nobody doing shit, they taking our culture. Wake up and see y'all, ain't no balance on one side of the seesaw. We at war with Esau, and ain't nobody down with us. My niggas get up, I know what it's like to wake up fucked up. I know what it's like when the pain cut deep. You can't get on your feet and you just wanna stay asleep. When the shit too much, a nigga needs to roll up. And all you got is this money and it still ain't enough. To live is to survive, gotta hustle to stay alive. My girl don't understand, I can see that look in her eyes. So not the trouble of soul, I pacify with lies. I inflict the pain and wipe the tears of her cries. Baby, I know you heard an apologies in advance. I just pray to God that he give me another chance. Trying to make it to heaven, I got a hell of a plan. Dancing with the devil makes me a hell of a man. Yeah, I'm trying to be a better man, but my nigga down south won't put me up 200 amps. He told me if I needed to put that shit in my hands, is that a curse or a blessing, or do I see at the end?
We learned that 120 of them were from the state of Georgia, the state that my own grandfather was a slave in. Why, to me, it couldn't have been anything but an act of God, a blessing from God, and I frankly and sincerely pray for similar blessings from him.
There's levels to this, and I said it like I said it, cause I wanted to hit. I give credit where it's relevant, we better than them. It's evident we set the precedence to elevate men, but we'll never know the imminence is killing other black men. And how we supposed to trust the hand we eat off if we hand fed the very poison we feed off? We don't even need all this extra shit they letting us get. It only hold us back from our excellence. Links up, get together, ball, invest in shit, the true value of life. Love my children and wife, love to all of my niggas who can't be free for the fight. R.I.P. all my niggas who passed on from this life. I love my brothers off the strength, whether he wrong or he right. Let your no.
Shalom, what's happening? What's cracking? What's cracking? We back. I know you see the title. God's love comes with correction. So yeah, we're gonna get into it though. Looking at these times that we at. So we've been lately we've been, covering, the judgment part of the prophecies and stuff, right? And so we've been getting into it, so yeah, we got it. So we're gonna get into it though. So this is, about our people, because our people got to understand, like, to serve God is, He has requirements, right? And those requirements is His laws. And, if you're not keeping the laws, then you're not, serving the Most High. And we got to understand that, because as His people, we are contractually bound to keep the laws. That's why things happen to us as a people, the calamities and stuff that we go through, because we don't keep those laws. That's why certain things happen to us more frequently than it does in the other group of people, because we don't keep the laws. So, something to think about. But of course, before we get started giving all praises to the Most High God, Yahweh, we do so in His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, who the world might know as Jesus Christ, right? So let's get right into it. We're going to start. Let's start with the book of Isaiah, right? Let's get Isaiah 65 in the GNT real quick. Just real quick. So yeah, we're gonna get in the GNT real quick, and probably read to about verse 8. So so here we go. So Isaiah 65 and 1, it says this. It says, I was ready to respond. It says, I was ready to respond, but no one answered for help. I was ready to be found, but no one was looking for me. I said, I am here, to a nation that did not call on my name. And that's what's, going on, like, because we've been so alienated from our true God, following these false gods that we, done got up into these different religions. And we're not calling on the one true God, to get us out of this situation. And it says, I was ready to respond, but no one asked for help. And that's the thing, because a lot of our people is comfortable here in this place over here. They think this is their place of rest, where, where dreams come true. But it says, I was ready to respond, but no one asked for help. It says, I was ready to be found, but no one was looking for me. And that's what's going on now. Nobody's looking for God. We all getting caught up in all types of manner of crazy philosophies and belief systems, instead of seeking out of the book of the Lord and seeing thus said the Lord and what He said to do, right? And that's what we caught up into. It's like, I was thinking, it's like, and I was just thinking about this, because it was this, I see him a lot. Like, I don't understand, like, how so many of our black women got into witchcraft, right? and like black magic stuff, right? Now I understand the voodoo stuff, because our people, some of our people, always kind of somewhat dealt in that. But I'm like, well, you'd be surprised, and I'm just looking like, wow, it's a lot, that dealing this type of stuff, right? That's why it says, I was ready to be found, but no one was looking for me. Because we all into this other stuff, right? And, it's crazy. And it says, and I said, here I am, to a nation that did not call on my name. And we didn't call on them. We didn't, we were, calling on, these false gods that we, was given to us in these religions that we follow now, these different denominations that we call ourselves, right? And it's not the God of this book. And it says, I said, here I am, to a nation that did not call on my name. And, like I said, because we did not call on his name. Because like it says over here, get this real quick, in Isaiah. Right here, Isaiah 1 and 3 says this: the ox know his owner, and the ass know his master's crib, but Israel do not know, my people do not consider. So we don't consider, who's our God, right? Who we belong to. Because if you go through the history of people, right, every civilization have their God, right, that they worship. But, we don't consider, right? We don't look into these things. And it says, the ox know his owner, and the ass know his master's crib, but Israel do not know, my people do not consider. Like I said, we don't consider that we're the people of God. When we read this book and see the things that the people went through, and see the prophecies that it says that they're going to go through, and we look through history of our people, we don't make the connection and say, we are the people of God, right? And, that's the thing. But, and again, because like I said, our people, we don't consider these things because we want to follow everybody else's God instead of our God. And back over here real quick. And it says, all day long I open my arms to a rebellious people, but they follow their own evil path and their own crooked schemes. And that's what happens. That's why you got all these different little so-called gurus, and you got the little Ben Carson dude, you got all these different people, right? Claiming that they got the way for the people. But it says, but they follow their own evil path and their own crooked schemes, right? And that's what a lot of these people do, right? Instead of doing thus said the Lord, right? It says, all day I open my arms to a rebellious people. And our people are very rebellious. The Bible says that we're stiff-necked, right? Hard-headed. Probably the most hard-headed people on the planet, right? Can't tell us anything, right? And because we tend to think we know it all. So it's hard to talk, tell somebody something, right? They think they know it all. Because it says, all day I open my arms to a rebellious people, right? And it says, but they follow their own evil paths and their own crooked schemes, right? And that's what, we do. That's why we cause a lot of harm to each other, because we concoct these crooked schemes to try to, advance ourselves and get over. Because we've been locked in this Esau world of living for so long. We follow their way of life because we see how they get rich by hurting and destroying people. So we say, well, shoot, maybe we can get rich by hurting and destroying people. So we follow that, right? When it tells us, envy not thy oppressor, right? And it says, all day long they insult me to my face by worshiping idols in their sacred gardens, right? And like I said, all this false idol worshiping, following these false gods. A lot of our people about to do a whole bunch of idol worshiping in a couple of weeks from now. Celebrating Valentine's Day. And then not only idol worship, and then that's Saint Valentine was a murderer. He slaughtered our people for and a bunch of other people, right? And they made him a saint. So, like I said, the holiday is crazy, right? But it goes back to pagan roots, and we're gonna be celebrating those things in a week or so, right? And it says, all day long they insult me to my face by worshiping idols in their sacred gardens. They burn incense on pagan altars. At night they go out among the graves, worshiping the dead. So our people went to necromancing, right? That's what I was saying earlier. I met a few people that's into the whole witchcraft stuff, or you got people that want to say they can talk to the dead, can talk to spirits and stuff like that, right? Into that necromancy stuff, not knowing that that's a demon that they dealing with, right? But it says, they eat the flesh of pigs. So then, that's for all those Christian folks that think it's cool to eat pork, and, because pastor eat pork and he done told you it was all right. And y'all, go to little church dinners and y'all pray over the ham and all that stuff. But it says, they burn incense. So the conversation is wicked Israel following after other gods and doing all manner of evil. Then he throws pork into the mix, right? Then he says, they burn incense on pagan altars. At night they go out among the graves, worshiping the dead. They eat the flesh of the pigs, and they make stew with other forbidden foods. And that's what that gumbo, the little shrimp gumbo with all types of manner of, filth up in it, right? Our ancestors, I think it was in 2 Kings or something like that, or, they was, somewhere, and somebody had brought them a pot of food, and they looked and saw what was in it. They was like, this is death, They threw it to the ground, they couldn't eat it. But like I said, now we're getting gumbos, you know what I'm saying? Shrimp and all the other stuff, right? That's crazy. Then it says, they eat the flesh of the pigs and make stew with other forbidden foods. And that's what we into. That's why a lot of our people end up getting sick and heart disease and developing hypertension and gout and all the other, health problems that our people suffer from. And it's amazing that when you look at the statistics, that we suffer more from these things versus everyone else, right? A white person almost got to be obese to, suffer from, similar health effects that we'll get just by just eating these foods on a regular basis, right? Look at, I don't know how many is familiar with that movie Ip Man, right? Ip Man, the guy that trained Bruce Lee, right? Taught him how to do the little Wing Chun stuff. So now, this guy, if you ever, see clips of him and see videos of him, always smoking cigarettes, right? I think the man lived to be like 90, right? Always smoking cigarettes. Asian guy. Tobacco, nicotine doesn't affect then doesn't affect him like it does with us. But our people, we smoke. Should we on a respirator by 60, 65, right? But this man lived to be like damn near 90. Smoke cigarettes down there every day. This nigga was doing workouts with a cigarette, smoking with a lit cigarette, right? So you gotta understand these laws and statutes and commandments that God gave to his people and told us, especially the dietary laws, the certain things that he told us not to eat. And it's a reason why he told us not to eat it. Then when we look at the statistics, the health stats, and how it's affecting our people, we see that out of the demographic, it is affecting our people the most, the Black, Hispanic, and Native American people, right? And it says, yet they say to each other, do not come too close or you would defile me. So then, you got those people that's, like I said, these holier than thou people, think they, close to God just like Jesus. They over there real tight, right? But, like I said, they eating all manner of evil. They eating all types of shrimp, crab, lobster, catfish, bacon, ham, all that, chitlins, all that, right? But then they say, don't come close or you will defile me. So then, they want to act like they're better than you, right? Because they go to church and they, got a nice little car and they got, wear their little nice little big hat, or they may have a little title in a ministry or something, or in the church, right? So, and they feel puffed up. But it says, don't come close to me, you will defile me. I'm holier than you. And that's how they feel. Like, I'm holier than you, because they have, maybe some letters next to their name. They got a little PhD, letter next to their name, right? Or, any other type of title, whatever, right? So they say, I'm holier than you. Or they might just feel like they might think they know something, or they just better than you because of whatever, right? I'm holier than you. These people are stretched in my, these people are a stench in my nostrils, an acid, arson smell that never goes away. Look, so, God ain't cool with that. God doesn't, people like that make God sick, right? It disgusts him. Then it says, look, my decree is written out in front of me. I will not stand silent. I will repay them in full. So God say, all you people that, don't want to, get with the program and want to, do as thy will and, not, keep the commandments and think that the law is done away with and you don't have to do what he says, which that doesn't make sense. What type of God do that acts to be worshipped, but you don't have to do anything that he says that you should do to worship him, right? The commandments and statutes are what he required for us to do to service and worship. And if you're not doing these things, then how could you say you're following them, right? That's like somebody calling themselves a basketball player, but if they're not getting up every day, going to the gym and practicing and working on their game, they just, never go to the court at all. How can they be a basketball player? Nobody never seen you play basketball. Nobody never see you do anything. But you telling everybody you're a basketball player and you're going to the NBA, right? That's what Christianity teach you to do. Teach you to be like, well, I know I'm going to heaven because I believe in Jesus. I know I'm saved because I believe in Jesus. But you don't do what he tell you to do, right? So it says, I will repay them. Yes, I will repay them both for their own sins and for those of their ancestors, said the Lord. Right? Then it says, for they also burn incense on the mountains and insult me on the hills. I will repay them back full. Right? So God is like, look, I'm not playing with you people. You know what I'm saying? Y'all done follow other gods and worship other, deities that I told y'all not to worship, right? Because I told you, that I'm your God, right? And none else. And we're, his people, right? And that's proven, right? Because some might not understand that the fact that there's 7 billion, 8 billion people on the planet, that God only loves and deals with one group of people, right? Some people might not believe that or understand that, right? So, real quick, make this real quick. There's a few scriptures to prove that God is dealing with Israel and not the other 7, 8 billion people, right? Although he created them. So, let's start with Ecclesiasticus 17 and 17 real quick. Let's go real quick. It says, 17 and 17, for the division of the nations. So God separated all the nations, right? Created all the people, separated all the nations, so everybody got their own country, right? That's what he did. For the division of the nations of the whole earth, right? So he split, divided all the nations, made all these different countries, 7 continents, 160 something countries or whatever. He did that, right? So it says, for all the divisions of the nations of the whole earth, he set, what did he do though? He set a ruler over every people. So that word ruler is in the Hebrew can also be translated as God. So it says he set a ruler over every people. But Israel, who? But Israel, what? But Israel is the Lord's portion. So God said, I will be your God. All those other nations, they got their own God. Because he said, for the division of the nations, meaning he divided the nations by people, by land, by country. We can agree to that, right? Because we can see that. When we look around the world, we can see that's how the world is set up, right? Then it says, of the whole world, he set rulers over every people. So then when you look through history, we can go through archaeology and see that every civilization had a god and a spiritual system and a cosmology that they believe in and that they follow. We see these things, right? That's true, right? That's true. Let's go right here real quick. Deuteronomy chapter 4 really quick. And let's start at 19. So Deuteronomy 4:19. Lest thou lift up thy eyes unto heaven. So the thou is the Israelite. So this is Deuteronomy. This is the law. This is Moses talking to the Israelites, giving the law from God to our people. So it says, lest thou lift... Hold up. These people be crazy. Where is that? No, never mind. But back over here. So it says, unless thou lift up thy eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the hosts of heaven. So he's telling the Israelites, if you decide to look up at heaven and you get, enamored and become an awe at the sun or any other celestial body up there, and you decide to start worshiping it like the Egyptians, they had their sun god and stuff, and other civilizations worship the sun in some type of form. Then it says, the sun and the moon, like the Muslims, they worship that moon. That's why they got the crescent the crescent moon and a star in the middle, because it goes back to their moon god. Then it says, and should and even the hosts of heaven. So the hosts of heaven is what we'll call these different deities, these angels or different gods or lesser gods, should we say, because it's the Most High God. Then these different lesser gods or angels and stuff. Because some people be into angel worshiping, a lot of stuff, right? You got other civilizations where they Zeus, their Baal, they're different deities that they worship, right? So it says the host of heaven. So these different spiritual, entities that people might follow, right? Then it says, and should be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God have divided. That's the key part. Because we just read over in Ecclesiasticus that he set rulers over every nation. We read that. So it says, who the Lord God have divided unto all nations under the whole heaven. So God gave them those things to worship. He said it's cool for them to take the sun and make a god out of it. They can do that. But you don't do that, Israel. You black, Hispanic, and Native American person, you. Then it says, it's cool if they want to take the stars and start worshiping the stars. That's cool. If they want to do that, all right. That's all right. But you don't do that. You black, Hispanic, Native American person, you. Right? That's what God said. Right? So, it says, lest thou lift up thy eyes unto heaven, and thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, and even all the hosts of heaven should be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God had divided unto all nations under heaven. So God said, don't do that, yo. We ain't, that's not, I gave them to, I told them they can worship that, right? Deuteronomy 18 real quick. Hold up. Hey, where it at? Alright, okay, this thing is 20. So 18 and 20, I think. It says, but the prophet which presumed to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or shall speak in the name of other gods. So again, that's the so it's other gods that the Most High God ordained for the other nations to follow, right? That was the point right there I wanted to get. So it's like, but if a prophet which shall presume to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or shall speak in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. So God said, don't, we not to follow those other gods, and don't even listen to those other people that's, trying to get us to follow these other gods, right? Let's go to 32 real quick.